Well, I don't know hundreds of them. I do know that the idea, though, of that more productivity and more stability comes from the bottom than from the top is a common idea in economics. And it is very much related to Catholic social teaching. So you are correct there. But I should say that distributism is not, when you point out that hundreds of others have pointed out the same need for distribution of productive assets, I'd say yes, that's correct, because distributism is not an alternative ism in a marketplace of isms. It is simply what men and women have done in healthy societies throughout history. The novelty is in things like communism and capitalism, not in distributism. It has a long history. And then, I think you are asking whether we can maintain our standard of living with economies built on distributed property rather than concentrated property. Well, that, I think, is an excellent question, because we have to look at actual practice. What actually happens. That's the answer to your question. Not, some formula which may divide production and be self-balancing, etc., etc., etc. So what actually happens? If you look at the United States, the average wage for, the median wage for workers has stagnated for more than 30 years now. The median wage is now the same as it was in 1973. But the productivity of the worker has increased at a tremendous pace. So how on the same wage did the wage worker absorb all the goods and services? Well, two methods. First, since 1973, more family members went to work. That is, more wives went to work. More women entered the marketplace. Okay? But after a while, that failed. For the last 10 years, the family wage in the United States has been stagnant. As a matter of fact, it's lower now than it was 10 years ago. The rest of the goods were absorbed on consumer credit. They borrowed the money to buy all the stuff. And now we can't pay it back. Now, if you compare that with what happened in the economies I was talking about, there's no real need for me to answer the question. I mean, experience answers the question. And no one needs to take my word for it. They can compare what happens in the Basque Country with what happens in New York. And that's the best answer anybody can give.
Puteți să formulați întrebări și limba română, nu lăsați asta să fie o barieră, nicio problemă, profesorul a...
I have a question. How can we implement distributism, taking into account that the people who hold the power, let's say great companies plus the government, will fight to hold their status, because having great capital means they will have a huge wall against us?
Well, an excellent question. It's the same question that one might have asked in, say, 1985. It seemed, certain political figures in 1985 seemed like they would be permanent fixtures in the life of Romania, in the life of Eastern Europe, in the life of the Soviet Union. None of you are old enough, the students, none of you are old enough to have any clear memories of that period. But I'm sure you've heard one or two stories My belief is, and in a way I hope I'm absolutely wrong, but my belief is that capitalism is undergoing the same, especially globalism, is undergoing the same process. Its own power is dissolving. So the question is not to worry about what's going to happen to capitalism. It's like worrying about what's going to happen to Ceausescu. The question is worrying about what you build, because the task of your generation will not be so much to maintain what's here, but to rebuild public order, to rebuild the economy. And your generation, I believe, will have a task that only comes along, you know, at most once a century. I hope not more than once a century. But you will get to rebuild an economy from the ground up, because that's the only proper way to build an economy.
How can you define true citizenship?
I'm sorry?
How can you define true citizenship?
True citizenship. Oh, well, excellent question. True citizen, first place, takes care of themselves, does not become a charge on the public if they can possibly avoid it. But that's not enough for true citizenship, because true citizenship is a connection with your neighbors, and it is a care for the common good. Part of this care for the common good must be involved with commerce, because commerce is the way most of us are going to provide goods and receive goods from the economy. But commerce, I believe, cannot be an end in itself. You know, it's a means to an end. It's a means to building healthy societies. I suppose, well, I know that you can regard it as just a way of making a living, you know. But I believe that if you view it from the aspect of citizenship, you'll see building a business and business management and marketing and operations and product development in a whole different light, in a light that involves not just the commercial aspect, but the gift aspect, the gift of oneself. And I think true citizenship transcends commerce to become an actual gift of the self.
I think that nothing will really work. In time, we are going to collapse because of one's nature. The man is greedy, he is weak, he is affected by his emotions. Even the best 10, I don't know, with altruist or something like that, will be affected in time by money. He will put his own interest first, then the others. The era of pharaohs lasted, I don't know, thousands of years, then collapsed. Then the era of kings collapsed too. Then the constitutional monarchy in Romania collapsed because of the others' interest. Then the socialism, then the capitalism. So nothing lasts forever. What do we do? How do we find a system that is good enough to satisfy us all? We can't do that because there will always be someone who is unsatisfied. There will always be, I don't know, Alexander the Great or nothing lasts forever. So even if you propose a system that is good, okay, we will implement it. It lasts 1 year, 1 year, what?
Yes, I understand. I think that's an excellent, thing to keep in mind. You cannot ignore the reality of human sin. You know, and just the way things, just the way they are. But at the same time, you cannot give in to it. I don't believe, sure, all systems we've ever known have collapsed. But on the way, some have lasted a long time.